Like you, I am heartbroken by the tragedies that have taken place across our country. The memories of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and far too many others remain with us, and our hearts go out to everyone, everywhere who is grieving and searching for justice. The American Heart Association denounces senseless acts of racial violence against individuals and unnecessary violence in our communities. As a nonprofit healthcare organization, we are taking a stand on social justice issues because it's the right thing to do and because there is scientific evidence supporting the link between social justice and health equity.
Racial disparities in heart disease, stroke, and other chronic conditions exist and are well documented. African Americans are also more likely to be uninsured. There is also scientific evidence that African Americans' physical and mental health is negatively impacted by the inequities that exist. Add this to the fact that in the midst of a global pandemic and given barriers to health that exist, African Americans and other people of color are disproportionately impacted by COVID-19.
The American Heart Association has championed health equity for all people for nearly a century, and we are more determined than ever to eliminate racial and class disparities. We will redouble our commitment to overcoming barriers to health and to addressing social inequalities.
We must stand together as a relentless force for a world of longer, healthier lives. That is our mission, our contribution to a more equitable society.
People are counting on us like never before. We will listen. We will drive change. We will be relentless. Thank you for your support, and thank you for listening.
Thank you for joining us today. At the American Heart Association, we recognize that we can do better, we must do better, and we will do better. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's conversation. It's time to release the pressure in New Orleans. I'd like to briefly introduce myself to everyone joining the call. I'm Coretta Lagarde, the Vice President of Health Strategies for the American Heart Association. I'm based here in New Orleans, but address strategic approaches to healthy living in equitable communities across Louisiana, alongside my great team of coworkers. We'd like to take a moment to go through the agenda and welcome all of our speakers. We have Dr. Takeisha Davis, the President and CEO of New Orleans East Hospital, who'll be addressing the national problem of high blood pressure and mental health. And then we have this wonderful panel moderated by Pamela Garmon Johnson, our National Vice President at the American Heart Association for Health Equity, Impact, and Partnerships. Our panelists consist of Nika Jervis, the Chief of Strategic Expansion at Girl Track, Dr. Baraka Perez, Medical Psychologist of Perez and Associates, Judge Rachel Johnson of the Orleans Parish Civil District Courts, and Dr. Bobby Banks, Health Equity Consultant and CEO of Pillar Consulting. We ask that if any attendees have questions or comments, please feel free to go inside that Q&A box at the bottom of the screen in the chat, and we will be monitoring throughout this presentation. As you can see from the next slide, our problem is clear. High blood pressure, especially when uncontrolled, is and has been an issue for this community. COVID-19 has only amplified those associated risks. The links between physical and emotional health are becoming clearer for the nearly half a dozen of non-Hispanic African-American men and women who have high blood pressure. We can no longer wait to fix this problem. We know for African Americans, high blood pressure develops earlier in life and is usually more severe, impacting your health. Our Heart Health Squad, which includes the AMA Foundation, National Medical Association, Association of Black Cardiologists, and Minority Health Institute is collaborating and coming together today in New Orleans to provide access to local mental health and heart health support with resources within our community. We are dedicated to partnering directly with those like us in the Black community to improve our heart health. Before our panelists of wellness experts join in, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Takeisha Davis. Again, she's the president and CEO of New Orleans East Hospital, prepared to meet your cardiac needs with the right care right where you need it.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. As we heard, hypertension is a silent killer, and heart disease is the #1 killer in women. In 2008, I received a call from my father that his 36-year-old girlfriend was sick. She was nauseous, lightheaded, and overheated, sweating. So they opened the windows, turned on the air conditioning like most of us would do. She kept vomiting, so I told them to bring her to the hospital. And 4 hours later, she was dead from a massive heart attack. And not much has changed since 2008 when this graphic was first completed. Heart disease is still the leading cause of death in the United States. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in Louisiana. Heart disease is the leading cause of death here in New Orleans. 1 in 4 women in the United States die from heart disease. And as African-American women, we have an even higher risk of dying from heart disease at a younger age, just like my father's girlfriend. 1 in 2 Black women over 20 years of age have some sort of heart disease. Next slide. And the risk associated with heart disease have higher rates in African-American women as well. Higher rates of high blood pressure or hypertension, higher rates of diabetes as compared to our white counterparts, which increases our overarching risk of heart disease, stroke, and congestive heart failure. Next slide. These disparities have also played out vividly before us during this current COVID-19 pandemic, where hospitalizations were 6 times higher and deaths 12 times higher among those who reported underlying conditions like hypertension, diabetes, and that means us ladies. Next slide. These increased hospitalizations and underlying health conditions have led to markedly higher death rates in African Americans, both men and women, that we have all witnessed around this country. Here in New Orleans, I don't know any African Americans who don't know at least one person personally who died from COVID-19. At one point back in March, I had multiple family members in the hospital at the same time, and currently still have one in the hospital fighting for his life today. Next slide. This cumulative compounded disadvantage experienced by African Americans all across our country impacts us almost daily. And it doesn't matter what titles or letters you have behind your name. These inequities have developed over our life course. Whether growing up in impoverished neighborhoods, going to underfunded schools, living in areas with food deserts, financial and housing instability, this disproportionality that we traverse daily on the backdrop of a historic pandemic and continued racial and social injustices is taking an unbearable toll on our families. Next slide. Unequal toll of this toxic stress is impacting women's and girls disproportionately. Women are more likely than men to live in poverty. Women are more likely to experience sexual or physical abuse. Women also have to deal with compounded impacts of racism and sexism in the workplace. All of this stress is not created equal, and neither are stress-related health outcomes and health risk factors like hypertension. The daily marginalization, microaggressions, targeting, and overt racism experienced by African American women of all socioeconomic levels, whether in leadership positions or not, is a recognized factor, as we heard, for the disproportionate rates of hypertension in African American women. And as we see here, the stress can be deadly, not just to us, but to our unborn children. African American women have the highest maternal and infant death and premature birth rates among all other groups in America. Exposure to discrimination and racialized stress throughout the lifespan does negatively impact birth outcomes. It increases the risk of hypertension, it decreases our life expectancy and that of our unborn children. Next slide. So this stress is a problem, ladies. I don't know about you, but I have found myself having less sleep, being more anxious on a day-to-day basis. And a recent CDC study showed that over 40% of the 5,000 respondents reported at least one adverse mental or behavioral health condition as a result of COVID. That means more anxiety, more depression, more suicides. And we add that to the social isolation and fear of the unknown, that when we walk outside of our door, maybe I'll catch a plague that I can't see, or maybe I'll be killed by a police officer for just being Black. That pressure in itself most definitely can bust pipes. And frankly, that's what high blood pressure is. It's increased pressure of the blood against the walls of our arteries. Next slide. So we must release the pressure. In addition to the local community resources that will be shared with you today, the American Heart Association and the American Medical Association are part of a national effort called Release the Pressure. This effort is aimed at improving heart health in African American women in collaboration with the Release the Pressure Heart Health Squads that we'll hear more about later. Together, these organizations are working to get more than 300,000 people across the country and here in New Orleans to take steps towards improving their heart health and combating those disproportionate rates that we've heard about today. Next slide. The first step in releasing the pressure is to set a blood pressure goal. You gotta know your numbers, and that means you have to see a healthcare professional. A normal blood pressure is below 120/80. And if you don't know your blood pressure, we encourage you to see your healthcare provider today and set a plan for a blood pressure goal that is below 120/80. Next slide. Step 2 is, once you know your numbers, you have to monitor them. And monitoring your blood pressure at home is vital because this reflects the pressure that you're exposed to every day throughout the day. So when you come to your doctor, we can look at your blood pressure log and take the appropriate steps. And how you take your pressure at home is really important, ladies. So we're going to show you a short video to talk about the correct way to measure blood pressure at home.
Okay, ladies, let's have a real talk about blood pressure. Do you monitor yours regularly? It's something everyone with high blood pressure should do, but it's something most people don't know how to do correctly. Checking your blood pressure regularly will help let you know if you have it under control. It will also help you start to understand which factors are putting you at high risk for stroke and heart attack. Before I get to that, though, I just want to stress one thing. If you have high blood pressure, you should talk to your doctor to figure out how frequently you should be checking it at home. For most people, taking your blood pressure twice in the morning and twice in the evening, even just for a week, will help you and your doctor get a better understanding of your blood pressure. For morning readings, it's best to take those before you take your blood pressure medication. It's also very important to avoid exercise, caffeine, or tobacco at least 30 minutes prior to testing, since those can affect your levels. Now, let's move on to talk about the proper way to measure your blood pressure at home. Nearly half adults in the U.S. have high blood pressure and are at high risk for stroke and heart attack. So self-measuring is one of the easiest ways to be proactive about our health. Here I have my blood pressure monitoring device. It's easy to use and it helps me get an accurate reading. Be sure to get an automated device with an upper arm cuff. That's the type doctors recommend. The first thing you want to do is find a quiet place to sit where your back is in an upright, stable position. A dining room chair is great. You want to make sure the chair isn't too soft so your body is fully supported. Sit with your feet flat on the floor and don't cross your legs or ankles. If you use the bathroom, make sure you go before you do your reading. Next, rest your arm on a flat surface with your palm facing up. Place the blood pressure cuff on your bare upper arm just above your elbow. Your arm should be relaxed and resting so the cuff is at the same height as your heart. Now rest quietly for 5 minutes before taking the first measurement. Avoid talking while taking your blood pressure measurement. Once your first measurement is completed, write down the blood pressure numbers and pulse that are displayed on the device. Wait 1 minute and then repeat this process again. As you just saw, it's important to check your 2 measurements at around the same time each morning and evening. At your next doctor's visit, be sure to share your blood pressure numbers so you can discuss the numbers and so your care plan can be changed if necessary. That's it. Not bad, right? Measuring your blood pressure at home is easy to do and a great way to stay on top of your health. If you have more questions about managing or measuring your blood pressure overall, visit the website.
So ladies, just to recap, step 1, make sure you set your blood pressure goal. Step 2, monitor your blood pressure at home. Pretty easy, right? Step 3 is activate your wellness plan. This is where it gets a little bit more difficult. I'm not saying you have to be Serena Williams or Coco Gauff, but getting up and moving is important. Move more, sit less. You work in an office, make sure you get up, walk around for 5 minutes or so, walk and get your lunch. Make sure you're getting up to use the restroom, that's important. But get up to 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise. That's what the CDC recommends. It's also important for us to stop stress in its tracks. As we've talked about today, there are so many things happening in our world that create increased anxiety and stress for us. We have to be intentional about taking some time to reset throughout the day. That means if you meditate, meditate. I close my door and I take 10 seconds sometimes just to take deep breaths before going into the next meeting. Or take some deep breaths before you speak. If a situation gets testy, walk away before you respond. Do those things that work best for you and try multiple options, but make sure that you're paying attention to your stress levels. Next slide. Step 4 is check with your squad. It is extremely and vitally important for you to make sure to look in lowering your blood pressure that you take the steps of sharing this information with your squad and releasing the pressure by taking the pledge at releasethepressure.org. We know that it's hard sometimes to follow a wellness plan, so you want to make sure that you have those supporters around you, even in this socially distant time. I like to say that you want to be socially connected, but physically distant. So as we see on the screen, you can use all those apps and smartphones that you have to stay connected to your squad. Check in with them and make sure that you all are being heart healthy. Thank you for having me today, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. I am so glad that you have given us, as in the chat, we are hearing that these are all very great reminders in order to have your heart health be its best. I would love to welcome Pamela Garmon Johnson up to the table. And Pamela Garmon Johnson is our National Vice President at the American Heart Association for Health Equity, Impact, and Partnerships, as she's going to lead a wonderful wellness panel full of discussion. And please remember, if you have your own questions or comments, enter them into the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Coretta, for that introduction, and Dr. Davis for an exceptional presentation. And I would like to just take the liberty for, what was the one thing, I'd like to ask everyone listening, what is the one thing that you took away from Dr. Davis's presentation? Just drop it in the chat. What is the one thing that you took away? And I'll just share what I took away, and that was, how do you find that little bit of time to have quiet time to yourself so that we can be mentally ready for all that call upon us, both personally and professionally. I have the honor today of moderating this panel with 4 dynamic women who are going to speak with us about the different aspects of mental health. And so with that, I think we should just jump right in and talk about mental health during COVID-19. And I know personally that after having lost a family member and then going through that with my family, it has been quite traumatic, coupled with everything else that is going on in the community. And then, of course, yesterday's information that came out about Breonna Taylor, a lot of that really did take a toll, and it really required that time to step away. So I would like to ask Onika and Rachel, what do they recommend as it relates to mental health steps that we can take? And we'll start with Onika.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having this conversation and having us. Just want to reiterate, it is so timely. And so what do I recommend? So first of all, the work that I do in terms of it's such an honor to be able to be a part of Girl Trek's national team, where every single day, right, we're interfacing with Black women and girls that are just doing their best every day to just motivate and to get out and to walk and to move. And so like for me, when I think in terms of what this COVID time has done for us as Black folks, when it is that we are hearing that it's affecting us by such larger rates and such higher rates, that's real. That is like really real for us, all the chronic illnesses. And so that is why, what Girl Trek has been doing for all these years, we're talking about get out there and walk and just move, find that time, move more and sit less, right? Dr. Davis, that's what we have been doing. And it's been such a really blessing that for the thousands of Black women that are moving, that they have had Girl Trek really as a support system. It wasn't just because of COVID, they were doing this. And so this was like already in their toolkit that they were really comfortable walking and moving. And so I would say, in terms of during this COVID season and our mental health was just to get out there. I know me personally, I have been walking, I have been moving, and it's been the one place where we've had the opportunity to just think, just to support. For Girl Trekkers, we've been walking virtually and talking with each other because we've been reinforcing, do not get together, y'all. This is not, our community is different. As much as we love supporting each other, we've got to also to pay attention to getting together, not wearing that mask, right? It has higher effects for us. So we've been getting together, getting on the phone, walking with each other and still giving that support. Girl Trek has been blessed to have our care crusaders, where not everybody is blessed during this time to be able to call a therapist, right? We know that our healthcare, right, we might not have that as all the other communities do. And so we've been able to put Black women to make phone calls to be able to call and support a sister through our Girl Trek support care supporters. We've also been gardening. We've been out there gardening and getting our self-care on. And so those are just a couple of things that we're saying. Just find something, breathe, yes. Get out there and walk, garden, call a sister. So these are some of the things that have been helpful to us during this COVID time.
Thanks, Onika. Rachel.
Yes, again, thank you. I'm adding my thanks to Onika. Thank you for having me. Dr. Davis talked about being anxious. That's the first word that comes to mind when I think about COVID, the anxiety that is produced personally, right? And what I know that my friends, my girl squad, what they are experiencing. And the thing that's been resonating for me is to extend grace to yourself and to others. And so, in the job that I do, I focus on deadlines and I focus on when people need to turn something in. And it's a hard line sometimes, but I found that in work, I've even had to extend grace to people. You know, you think about lawyers and judges and doctors and, you know, we got it all together. Well, we don't. We're going through this the same way. And I want women to know whatever their thing is, if they're super mom, you don't always have it together. It's okay. And so extending grace to others is important right now, but it's also important to extend grace to ourselves. I think what I've been doing is reevaluating what's most important. We're all in this house all the time together, me, my husband, my stepkids. And I'm like, okay, let's extend the house to outside. And so that means we need to get outside, you know, every day. I think God smiled on us. The spring was amazing. We were able to sit outside every day and take walks and learn to ride bikes. That was a goal that we had, and COVID blessed us. We were able to do it. And so those things, reevaluating what's really important and doing those kinds of things to take care of ourselves, I think it's crucial all the time, but even now, the pressure is real, whether we acknowledge it or not. I think that's the first step. We got to acknowledge it. The pressure is real. And so what can we do to kind of release some of that pressure, extend grace, move, as you said, get that fresh air, and just the things that are not that important and critical, just put them on the side for right now. We'll get to it. Get to the important stuff, which I think is the self-care right now.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Onika. You know, what I'd like for each one of you to do is just drop in the chat, what have you done during COVID? Have you taken up a hobby? Did you start walking? Did you start meditating? For me, I started meditating and I started riding a Peloton bike. And I've joined this whole group of Black women in Peloton. Oh my gosh, it is fire. And so we are a squad and I love it. So I'm going to transition over and talk about this whole notion of wellness and what it means to address the whole person and mental health and the connection between mental health and heart health. And so Baraka, will you provide some insight on this topic?
Sure. Thank you for having me, and I'm learning so much from this wonderful panel. So this is awesome, and I applaud the American Heart Association for putting this together for us. The whole person approach is a multifaceted manner of care used to guide healthcare providers to assess all aspects of the individual, particularly physical and emotional. Now, this approach is important because many mental health issues have physiological presentations and vice versa. For example, anxiety wreaks havoc on our emotional well-being, but it can also wreak havoc on our bodies. Heart palpitations, shortness of breath, tummy trouble, and even physical pain are often symptoms of anxiety. So in addition to low mood, difficulty concentrating, and loss of interest in hobbies, depression can also affect our sleeping and eating patterns, potentially resulting in significant weight loss or gain. Consequently, what may appear to be a physical issue could potentially be symptoms of a mood disorder or the reverse. That being said, individuals experiencing such symptoms may present at their physician's office or a behavioral health center. As a medical psychologist, I encourage physicians to explore their patients' emotional well-being along with their thorough physical exams. Simple questions about lifestyle, interpersonal relationships, job productivity, and stressors can often offer some insight and serve as red flags for any mental health concerns. As mental health providers, we should be mindful of the physical emotional connection, allowing us to identify areas in need of attention and treatment. It's important for us to maintain the balance of mental health and heart health. This is essential. Long-term activation of our body's stress response system, it puts us at risk for health problems, especially issues related to the heart. When we experience low mood, lack of motivation generally follows. If you're depressed, it is extremely challenging to even get out of bed, let alone exercise or eat properly. This puts healthy individuals at risk, and it negatively affects those with pre-existing heart conditions. There are numerous lifestyle changes and treatments that can improve both psychological and physiological symptoms in a very safe manner.
Thank you so much. And I would love for, you can tell I like for people to be engaged. So I'd love for you to drop in the chat, what do you do to maintain mental health? And they may look different than what you do from a exercise standpoint. So drop in the chat what you do to maintain mental health. One of the things that I have observed over the last year, that there has been an emphasis placed on mental health in a lot of the TV shows and movies, especially ones targeted to the African American community, because it's been so taboo to talk about mental health. And even if you do seek counseling, that has always been taboo. And so I would love for us to shift and really think about, how preventative care can play a pivotal role in improving mental health and heart health in the Black community. And then also, when you really look at mental health and heart health, what can we do, since we've been so sedentary during this time period? And Bobby, if you would like to take that question.
Absolutely. So as one of the visionaries behind Envision Empowerment Experience, we wanted to really create a space where we do exactly this. We are discussing issues that may not be necessarily highlighted or known in our respective communities. And so we're in the midst of a double pandemic. All of my sisters on the panel have just talked about, this trifecta with anxiety, with poor diet, with sedentary lifestyle being inactive. I think this is also an opportunity to really acknowledge where we are. So if you have a horrible day, to really see and to know that, and to be able to speak that to someone else. We've said the word squad so many times. Having really good people in your circle when you're laid out on the couch with your face almost on the floor, to call and say, I have my face mask on outside, we're doing a socially distanced walk. Literally one person out on the street and one person safely out on the street and one person on the sidewalk. Or with my high school friends, we've been checking in twice a month now, just to really reflect and love on each other, which we would not have done if we were not in the midst of this pandemic. So acknowledging where we are, really finding the silver lining as part of this pandemic. It is terrible, it's horrible. But I also think that we are the people that we've been waiting for. And so part of my self-care, people know, and if you've ever come to Envision, is that you have to move, whether it's dancing, whether you throw on Pandora, something to get the sweats, the beads of sweat on your forehead, going for a quick walk in the morning, breathe, because when you get really excited or you get anxious, you hold your breath in. So really thinking about that.
Thank you so much for that. When we think about, we call it policy systems and environment change, right? And, what changes do we need in our communities? And when you think about New Orleans, what policies need to be erected to ensure that we do have comprehensive mental health available to everyone? Our children are experiencing trauma. But do they have the support, not just now, but continually throughout their lifespan? So when you think about that, Rachel, what comes to mind? What do you think are some policies that could be put in place?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, and I think someone said this, the acknowledgement of the fact that these issues exist. I think for so long, and I don't know if people know this, but I was trained as a clinical social worker, and then I became a judge. So this is my second career. But even in the clinical social work field and where I am now, it's still taboo to deal with all kinds of mental health issues. And I just said anxiety that I'm experiencing, my friends are experiencing. It's not those people over there who have mental health issues and we need to talk about them and let's diagnose them. We all have some form of stuff that we're dealing with, and it's okay. So I think the first thing we have to do, whatever space we're in, me as a judge, is to understand and make my colleagues understand that we have to normalize what people are dealing with and meet them where they are. We have a pilot program at Civil District Court where we've implemented what's called mental health court, and Judge Kern Reese is doing it, and he is helping people who are in mental health programs. They're coming to the courthouse and they're kind of reporting in and checking in and making sure they stay on track on their mental health journey. But it's a pilot. It's just us, right? It's not widespread. It's one judge and one court. That's not enough. And so I think, you know, for me, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that mental health is not a taboo. It's a good thing. We need to be healthy mentally. So if you have anxiety, you have depression, whatever your issue is, let's deal with it and meet people where they are. As I say, extend grace, and then get people where they can function and be a functioning adults. And so whatever the policies are, you know, for the court, like I said, for us, we can have more mental health courts. I can implement when a person comes in to court. I can talk about this all day, so I'm gonna wrap up. When a person comes into court and they're unrepresented, which happens a lot in domestic situations where they're wanting child support, custody, it's important for me to acknowledge that this person may have something else that they're dealing with, and giving them a ruling that'll help them get that one thing they need may set them on a really good path for success. Whereas if I just ignore it and not figure out what's going on holistically, may set them on another spiral. So I think those policies about not just looking at, tell me what's on paper, what you're coming to me for, what is this person dealing with as a whole, and meeting people where they are.
Mental health court. I absolutely love it. American Heart Association needs to research that a little more and think about how we can expand that. That is quite profound. And I think I will be reaching out and working with you and Coretta about that and talking about that in greater detail, especially as we are moving more and more into mental health and not really thinking about our bodies as these disparate pieces. We are a whole person. And I think that the more that we can talk about the whole person, the more that we are able to reach individuals. You know, one of the things that, and I would really like maybe for Bobby or Baraka to speak to this, and that is, you know, seeking professional help. You know, when you lose someone, we try to like grieve, and, you know, we snap, we start eating a lot, or we don't eat at all, and we don't have an outlet. And, you know, for me personally, you know, after losing your best friend, you know, having that professional to help guide you through that process, I'm not saying that the grief is not there, but what I am saying though, the exercises that they put you through help you get through that process, and you come out better on the other side, so that you can deal with other issues that you have going on in your life. And so it's not just about that one moment in time, but long term. So if one of you would like to comment on that, this was my own question. If one of you would like to comment on that, that would be great.
Sure, I can. My mother passed away from a massive subarachnoid hemorrhage to the brain. She had a rupture in her brain, and that was my second year of graduate school. And that's when I really learned that blood pressure is also driven by stress and by grief. And some of the best counsel that I received, it was probably about a year after she passed, was from my Black mentor. And she had me close the door in her office, and she asked, "How are you doing?" And, you know, I was like, "I'm fine. I'm doing I'm writing down all my notes." And she said, "No, how are you doing?" And that's when I released everything. And the best counsel I received is that everybody needs a paid friend if you have the resources. And she was talking about a therapist. And this to me was so foreign and so taboo, because Black people don't go seek counseling or therapy. But it was the best investment. I was so glad I had the resources to speak to a therapist, but she helped navigate me not only through the grief of losing my mother in my eyes prematurely, but also knowing how to navigate life. Boundaries, both professionally and personally, really reflective on myself, my contribution to my grief, and even the world's contribution to my grief, and how to really heal. So my friends will tell you, I'm like, therapist, go look in Blue Cross Blue Shield or whoever you have your insurance through and see who's covered. I would not have gotten through that period of my life at all. And I only knew that I was hypertensive because I went for a regular wellness check, and my blood pressure was, I was almost stroking. One of my best friends had to come to the clinic. They had called my emergency contact. And to me, it was just another day. So therapy saved my life. I highly, highly recommend it. Sorry. I'm getting
Thank you, Baraka. Would you mind adding in here?
I'd love to. You know, there have been so many great points made this evening. It's really hard to add something else because everyone has just covered so many wonderful things. I think it's very important for us to monitor our mood. It's very important for us to monitor where we are, because what tends to be the norm to us may not necessarily be the norm. We, especially as Black women, are so accustomed to being that superwoman and putting that cape on and being strong for everyone else. Y'all, you can't do that all the time. It's not realistic. So when we have these certain standards and we try to do everything for everyone, we tend to fail to take care of ourselves. Imagine if you are a mom and you have 5 children. Okay, you get the flu. Oh well, the whole family is going to be affected by that, because when you are not well, when you are not at your best, you can't be what you want to be to other people. Meditation is something that I really encourage. It's something that you don't have to train to do for years. You can do it for 30 seconds, just closing your eyes. Use those 30 seconds in the morning when you first wake up to start your day, and use 30 seconds at night before you go to bed. Think about what you're grateful for. When we're focusing on those positive things, that lifts our spirits. So if we can start the day with something positive and end the day with something positive, that does a lot for our mental health. Being a village, having a village, seeking that social support, and definitely seeking professional help is essential. We've seen a significant increase in my practice since March. I'm glad that people are seeking help, but more people need to seek help as well. The door is always open. We are always willing to help, whether that's with medication management if needed, as well as therapy.
Thank you so much for that. And as you were speaking about, us as women, also check in on your children. If you have children, check in on your children, check in on your family members, those that have been by themselves during this time period. Check in on them, because I think it's really important, and their moods. One day you call and they're like happy, the next one they're like doom and gloom. That's important, and that is what being a part of a squad really is so impactful. And I'm going to share my one last little tip that I do with my family, and you can do it free, but restorative yoga, that 10 minutes with your family, and we do this. And I have found that it really brings a lot of peace for us, because there is so much on our plates. But Google that. I'll drop in a couple of links in the chat, but restorative yoga. So we have one more question, and it really has to do with, support. And I've been trying to pay attention to the chat, but then also paying attention to the feedback that has been provided by these wonderful speakers. And that is, what programs exist in the New Orleans area that can help individuals with mental and physical health, just overall well-being. And I want to throw that out to Anika and Takeisha, if you don't mind, jumping in here and providing some insights to the New Orleans community. Anika, you're on mute.
Yeah. And making sure that I was listening to everybody. So in terms of, I think some of the resources that just come to my mind is, again, when I think of of us having Women's with a Vision, that they are there as a really great support system for us to just talk and have women that are there helping us to talk. Obviously, we're here as Girl Trek, we are here as well. in terms of just about every on the West Bank, on, you know, in New Orleans East, right? We're walking from the hospital, Dr. Davis. We are walking from the hospital out in New Orleans East at Joe Brown at Every Park. So Girl Trek is here. On Facebook, it is, you know, Girl Trek New Orleans. Those are some of the things. I know in terms of, when you mentioned the children, we have Hands and Heart, right? Am I getting it right? You know, we've got our sister friend, Essence Bank, that she's really talking about heart health for our young women. And so there we have, again, we're talking about Project Butterfly, that again, talking about our young people. This is so stressful. These times are just so stressful for our young people as well. So Pamela, thank you for talking about them as well. They are here again in terms of resources for us. So those are just a couple that come to mind. And I know that again, you know, we can, you know, for us, you know, we talk about just being able to prayer and action, right? That we want to make sure that as we pray, we are a praying people, right? But also we're about action. And I just want to mention just really quickly, Pamela, when you asked that question about what is some of the policy, and this is something that again with American Heart, Girl Trek has the opportunity to work with the American Heart Foundation on this. When we talk about green space, safe green space for us to be able to get outside, that is something that we're working really, really hard with the New Orleans Complete Streets Coalition to make sure that we have sidewalks and that we have trees and that we have safe parks, because we want to be able to utilize that to make sure that our mental health is being addressed. So those are just a couple of things that I know that's really passionate and work that we're focused on here in New Orleans.
Thank you, Anika. Takeisha?
Sure. Thank you so much for that, Anika. And I do have to give a shout out to Girl Trek as well for reminding us at the hospital about the importance of utilizing all aspects of our campus. We have a great Girl Trek group that prior to the pandemic was walking here every morning, and it made us realize we needed to put resources outdoors. So we put some stationary exercise equipment to be able to connect to our city-funded park right across the street. And so I think there are lots of opportunities to partner that way, but shout out to Girl Trek. In addition to the resources that Onika mentioned, we have wellness programs like at New Orleans East Hospital, like Get Know We Fit, and recognizing that we need to invite the community in for education, but to get moving, move more, sit less. And so prior to COVID, on Wednesdays, 1 o'clock, we'd have community members come in, seniors mostly, and do yoga or line dancing, some type of physical activity, and get 15 minutes of didactics about how to control their blood pressure, how to control their diabetes. We know DePaul Community Health Center has similar programs. They also have behavioral health therapists that can help patients at their sites, both children and adults. Here at the hospital, we also have a partnership with Avenues Addiction Recovery. And I did want to just make sure that as we were talking about our total health and the stress and anxiety that we have all been facing to some extent during COVID in the pandemic of social injustice as well, is that our substance abuse and physical abuse rates have risen, particularly in our community. And so we need to acknowledge that, that even though we live in New Orleans and we love to party, that using mind-altering substances is not the way to deal with the stress that we may be impacted with. And for those community members who may be struggling there, that there are resources like Avenues. I did put in the chat, Metropolitan Human Services District provides behavioral health and addictive health services to our community members across New Orleans, irrespective of means to pay. That's important because if we talk about policy change, mental health resources are scarce in the metropolitan area already. There are disproportionate rates of access for our community members based on your ability to pay. And so for those members who are in lower socioeconomic ranges, as Bobby mentioned, they may not be able to pay for a friend, but Metropolitan Human Services District provides an opportunity for that. So I do think that there's a lot more work for us to do in ensuring that we're taking care of the whole person and ensuring that people have proper access to the care when they recognize they need it.
Thank you so much. And just one last thing I want you all to do before I turn this back over to Coretta, and that is, what is the one thing that you're going to do differently as a result of this conversation today? And if you'll drop that in the chat, what is the one thing that you will do differently or you will incorporate into your life as a result of this conversation today? Thank you to this wonderful panelist panel. You all have been amazing and phenomenal, and to our keynote speaker. Coretta, I will turn this back over to you.
Thank you all so much. This has been a phenomenal conversation with phenomenal women. This real talk on mental health and its impact on our heart health, especially at this time. I cannot say it again that this could not be a more timely discussion. If we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide, it's just so important that we take care of our hearts through physical exercise, good food, and taking care of our mental health. And we do have more information on healthy lifestyles available to you if you go and look at heart.org/New Orleans. As you can see right here on the screen, we have all of our information, including several resources around COVID-19. We also want to make sure that you check out our New Orleans Facebook, Louisiana Instagram, all of our resources there that we're going to be putting in the chat as well. And we'll be sending out all of these resources that you all have shared throughout this entire presentation. Going on to the next slide, just want to make sure that each of you take the necessary steps. First of all, go out and take that pledge at releasethepressure.org. If you don't go to the pledge, if you don't go straight to the pledge, you can get to it from our New Orleans Heart Walk page, our New Orleans Heart page as well. You can see what I have on my mind walking. We want you to share this webinar with your family and friends. We are going to send this out to all of you after the conversation, and make sure you visit that landing page that we just shared with you all. We did have one question that, as we were monitoring the chat, I want to make sure that we catch this really quickly since we do have a minute. From our panelists, in your opinion, in this current environment, what is the most significant health risk for Black women in New Orleans? If you could share really briefly, each of you, what you think that risk is.
High blood pressure. The stress-related high blood pressure that is leading to our disproportionate rates of death from heart disease, to me, is at a proportion that is alarming. And we should, as African American women, be addressing this in an alarming way.
That's a tough question. That's a tough question, right? Because there's so many things we're faced with. But I would want to say that inactivity, like if we do not move, right, then all of the blood pressure, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, so we've got to move. So inactivity and the isolation from this COVID as well. So we got to move and talk to each other.
I think for me, it's the stress. I know Dr. Davis mentioned it when she talked about the high blood pressure, but the stress that I hear from my friends and my colleagues, it's huge and it's impacting us. And I think this is one of those steps we need to take to try to address it.
Yeah. I agree. Anxiety and stress, sky high. Learn how to manage that.
I agree with that. And I think stigma is something else that we have to address. Now, we understand that there's a long-standing history of African Americans being subjected to inadequate or sometimes even brutal treatment by doctors. So I can understand why people in our community are hesitant to open it up to people who don't look like them or understand their culture. This is the message I want you to take away from this. As you can see from this magnificent panel today, sisters are rocking and rolling up and down, left to right. We are your psychologists, we are your physicians, we're your health advocates. We can relate to your trials and tribulations. We understand the health disparities in our communities. We chose our professions because we want to encourage individuals of color, especially women, to use the community support and medical care that from people who will be attentive and responsive to your needs. Please let us assist you in any way we can in taking care of you and helping you be the healthiest version of yourself.
Oh, I love that. And Coretta, may I just add, keep asking questions. If you go to someone and they don't answer your question or you don't feel like you got the right answer, then go to someone else until you get the answer. I think when I hear about when we go and we're like, well, I didn't have a good experience or they didn't help me, well, find someone that can, because your life really does depend on it.
Thank you all so much. Though that was very insightful. This has been a great conversation. On behalf of the American Heart Association and the American Medical Association and our Heart Health Squad and May Foundation, National Medical Association, Association of Black Cardiologists, and Minority Health Institute, thank you all again for joining us to release the pressure in New Orleans. Also, a very special thank you to all of our panelists today and our featured speaker. You made this event possible, and it was definitely amazing. Join us and your squads in protecting our hearts. Take our Heart Health Pledge at releasethepressure.org. Have a great afternoon, everyone.